Welcome to the Under Center podcast. We're going to do a little fantasy sports from a Bears perspective. And we got the man himself, Matthew Berry, the host of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. You can check out all this great content in his top 200. And of course, we all love the great Love Him or Hate Him column. Check that out on NBC Sports. You can watch him on Peacock and, of course, NBC's YouTube channel. Matthew, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Ken. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. And look, now this year here from a Bears side of things, we actually may have an offense. We will see. It's early. We will find out. But I have to find out your best player from the Bears that I have to select, I guess, in perhaps the first several rounds on the fantasy side.
I think if you're picking, by the way, yeah, all of a sudden the Bears are interesting, right? I mean, it's really, like, I would think, Ken, if I was you or anyone else covering the Bears, that you've been sort of slogging through this for years, all of a sudden, it's fun. You guys got a lot to talk about. So I think it's going to be a good year, certainly an interesting year in Chicago. My highest ranked player on the Bears in terms of overall is DJ Moore. He's my wide receiver 21. I'm sure you're going to ask me about Caleb Williams. We'll talk about him in a second. But just in terms of the overall, because quarterback is such a deep position and my ranks are done for leagues that only play one quarterback, that's why Caleb Williams is lower in the overall, just because there's such depth of that position. But if you wanted to ask me who's the highest rank at any given position, Caleb Williams would be my highest guy. I have him ranked higher I have Caleb Williams ranked higher at quarterback than I do any of the wide receivers or running back at their respective positions. But in the overall, the answer is DJ Moore. 28.5% target share last year, career highs in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns as well. And now he gets to play with Caleb Williams. He's not going to have as much defensive attention on him, obviously, because of the additions of Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, both tight ends, Swift out of the backfield. So DJ Moore would be my highest ranked Chicago Bear this year. And I think he's in for a big year. I think he's a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3.
My preference is one quarterback league, so I'm happy that's the way we're going. I haven't gotten into the 2 quarterback leagues for all you 2 quarterback league guys. Listen, we talked about DJ Moore, and when you look at DJ Moore's performance last year, the Bears had one of the most lopsided when you're talking about numbers from receiver 1 to receiver 2. How are you ranking the rest of the Bears offensive players in your top 200?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I told you DJ Moore is my wide receiver 21. I have Keenan Allen at wide receiver 32. Wrong side of 30, which you don't love. You don't love about that. He turned 32 in April. And you think about what Shane Waldron, the new offense coordinator of the Bears, obviously. You think about what Shane Waldron did last year in Seattle. Seahawks, bottom 3 in the NFL in slot targets, which is obviously a place where Keenan Allen is very comfortable. He can play all over, but slight concern there in terms of the target share to Keenan Allen, especially versus DJ Moore. Having said that, 7 straight years with at least 70 receiving yards a game for Keenan Allen. He's averaged at least 6 receptions per game, 9 consecutive years. He's a pro. And I think, I don't have a stat to back this up, Ken, but like, if you're Keenan Allen and all the level of success that he's had, and all of a sudden you get traded for a 4th rounder, I think there's some motivation there to prove to the Chargers and the rest of NFL, hey, you should have come get me. And the fact that, again, that it's not all going to be a bunch of the defense won't be able to just focus on Keenan Allen because of all the weapons the Bears have. And then I have Odunze at wide receiver 40. Unbelievable talent. Love the draft pick for the Bears. Just the concern is this is very kind of simple, easy, lazy analysis. But I do think just because that's the case, it doesn't mean it isn't true. The fact of the matter is that, again, last year, Seattle, bottom half of the NFL in terms of plays run from 11 personnel. Shane Waldron really likes 2 tight end sets and 12 personnel. And so how often does Rome Odunze get on the field? And when he's on the field, how often can he command targets when you've got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen? All right, so that's the concern. I think Odunze, great value in Dynasty, but without an injury to Moore or Allen, it's hard to see him having consistent fantasy value just because of the way we've seen this offense run in Seattle. I liken it to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who we all loved talent-wise last year, but he goes to Seattle under Shane Waldron. You had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and it was a disappointing rookie year from a fantasy perspective for JSN, and I think that's what's going to happen here for Rome Odunze, certainly in the first half of the year, again, barring an injury to any of the other big guys.
Matthew, in leagues where you can only start one quarterback, Where do you draft your second quarterback, and would you draft Caleb and stash him in later rounds?
I honestly don't think I would in leagues that only play one quarterback, unless it was a league that was like deeper, a 14 team or deeper. But in a 10 or 12 team league, I usually draft one quarterback and that's it, because I can find replacement value. I have Caleb Williams at QB 13. Means in a 12 team league, I'm not drafting him. But in a 14 team league, I am. And I think in that case, I will say that Caleb Williams should have a very nice fantasy year. Right? I mean, I think he's not Jaden Daniels, but he's more mobile than he gets credit for as well. Obviously, unbelievable talent surrounding him. I feel like if you're Justin Fields, you're sort of like, well, where were these guys when I was there? You couldn't have given me somebody? So I don't think there's ever been a situation, Ken, where a number one quarterback, a first-round draft pick, like the number one overall draft pick at quarterback, has come into a situation with as much talent around them as Caleb Williams is walking into this year in Chicago. If there's a downside to Caleb Williams' fantasy value, it's a couple of things. One is that I think it's going to be a balanced offense, right? I mean, I think you'll see, I don't think they're going to be crazy pass heavy this year. Yes, Caleb Williams runs, but he doesn't run the way that a Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen, a Anthony Richardson, a Jaden Daniels, that we expect him to run. So he runs, but he's not going to run as much as some of the other guys. And then the last thing here is I think the Bears defense is going to be pretty good this year. I feel like they really came on towards the end of last year. And I think that's, if you're a Chicago fan, you like that. But I think if you're a fantasy manager of Caleb Williams, you're like, well, so you're not going to have a ton of shootouts, especially as it gets colder in Chicago towards the end of the year and you're getting into some of these NFC North battles. Again, really like Caleb Williams a lot. He's my QB 13. But in a 10 or 12 team one quarterback league, I'm probably not taking him.
You mentioned Jaden Daniels, and of course you have Bo Nix now, but it's probably going to be, we know it's going to be the starter with the Denver Broncos. Where do you rank these rookie quarterbacks coming into the season? You already said you had Caleb at quarterback 13.
Yeah, I mean, I have Jaden Daniels at 11. I have Bo Nix. I don't have my rankings memorized, but I have Bo Nix, I think, I want to say could be 19 or 21. I think Bo Nix is interesting. But again, interesting I'm in a deep league, I'm in a 2-quarterback league, I'm in a super flex league. Jaden Daniels, because of the rushing yards. Jaden Daniels, over 2,000 rushing yards, over 20 rushing touchdowns combined in his last 2 seasons at LSU. Think about Cliff Kingsbury when he had a highly touted rookie quarterback the last time, Kyler Murray in Arizona. Murray was a top 10 fantasy quarterback his rookie year under Kingsbury, and I would argue that Murray didn't have nearly the weapons around him that Jaden Daniels will have in Washington with Terry McLaurin. I already told you, I think Luke McCaffrey becomes a thing. Be surprised, but you're going to see some Diami Brown this year. You're going to see some Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott. Obviously, Austin Eckler out of the backfield. But it's really the rushing of Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is going to, at least has the ability, at least from what we saw in college. Jaden Daniels has Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen type rushing ability. That kind of, even Justin Fields, that kind of rushing ability. Even though Justin Fields struggled as a passer, we saw how great he was because of his legs. Justin Fields was a top 7 fantasy quarterback, on a points per game basis because of the rushing. And so Jaden Daniels, who has that crazy upside as a rusher, but also loves to chuck it deep, big chunk plays as well, I think Jaden Daniels has a really nice fantasy year.
Matthew, we have really, really 2 good offenses within the NFC North right now. When you look at the Lions and you look at the Packers, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, even the return of Justin Jefferson with the Vikings. How do you rank out the top NFC North players?
Well, so at quarterback, you mentioned Jordan Love. By the way, look at the Packers' upcoming schedule. The early season schedule for the Packers is amazing. So I have Jordan Love at QB 9. We talked about with Caleb at 13. And then I have Jared Goff at QB 16. Running back in the NFC North, I have Jahmyr Gibbs as my running back 5. Aaron Jones at running back 19. David Montgomery at running back 20. On wide receiver, Justin Jefferson is my wide receiver 3. Amon-Ra St. Brown, my ride or die from last year, is my wide receiver 5. And then we already talked about DJ Moore at wide receiver 21. And my number 1 tight end this year comes from the division. Sam Laporta is my number 1 tight end this year. I think he's going to have a very big year. It's really interesting because the Lions play so good offensively when they're indoors. Jared Goff averages almost 20 points a game when he plays indoors. Well, you look at the Lions and look at their schedule. They only play 3 games this year outdoors. 14 of their 17 games this year are played in a dome. So the downside is that 2 of the 3 games that they play outdoors happen in like week 16 and 17, I believe, which is, smack dab in the fantasy playoffs. But I do think the Lions offense is really going to hum this year.
In a snake draft, where do you have to pick certain positions in the first 3 rounds? And does it depend on where you're picking? So if you're picking at the back of the round and you're going to be at the beginning of the round, you have a different philosophy that you follow.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So where you pick in the round obviously has a tremendous determination on sort of where you go and what you do. But no, I wouldn't say like, oh, I'm picking 8th. This means I'm definitely getting a running back. Oh, I'm picking 3rd. It means I'm definitely getting one of the elite wide receivers, blah, blah. I think it depends on your league scoring system. It depends on your own personal tendencies and risk tolerance. It also depends on sort of how the draft, comes to you. So if you had pick 3, I've seen like whatever Tyreek Hill go there, and I've seen people take Bijan or Breece Hall there. It sort of also depends on how you would like to construct your roster. It's why I always recommend whatever platform you're going to play on, go and do a mock draft, do multiple mock drafts, and see what happens. Like if you have the 3rd pick I'm making it up. You have the 3rd pick in a 12-team league. Okay, go do mock drafts on whatever site you're playing on. Like say if you're on Yahoo. All right, I'm going to go on Yahoo. I'm going to do some mock drafts from the 3 spot. What happens when I take Bijan at 3 or Breece Hall at 3? Okay. What happens when I take Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson at 3? Okay. What happens if I go running back? What happens if I wait on tight end? What happens if I go Laporta in the 2nd? Just play out all the scenarios and just sort of see how it falls to you. And then you can sort of see, oh, I really like the running backs in this 5 to 7 round range. So you know what? I can load up on elite wide receivers early because I know I'm going to get good running backs here, or vice versa. So, Ken, I don't really love to say, hey, you have to do this in this spot. I'm a big believer in let the draft come to you and sort of make the best decision you can in the moment. I'm a big believer in best player available.
All right. And look, everyone, make sure you check out his top 200. So this may go against what you just said. Are there players you have to select for you in this upcoming draft's first round that you can't leave the first round and you have the option to pick up this player?
No, there are players I like more than others. Obviously, that's why I rank them, right? But
Right.
but no, there's no player that I'm like. If there's one player that I say like I want to leave every draft with if I can, it's Kyler Murray. It's my ride or die. That's the point of ride or die. And so I've probably in all the leagues I've done, I think I probably have probably 70% of the leagues that I'm in, I have Kyler Murray as my quarterback.
My last question. If there's a star offensive player that's injured and perhaps is coming back in the first quarter of the season, when do you pick that player up? Do you draft them or wait a couple of weeks? Or if it's a player that is either coming off injury late or suspension late, do you pick them up early or do you wait till they come off of the suspension or injury before you acquire them?
Yeah, I think it sort of depends on the player and the situation and also team needs. Again, like just give an example, Jonathan Brooks. I love Jonathan Brooks this year, but he's not going to play for a little while. He's still recovering from the ACL tear. Once he gets back in Carolina, he's going to be the guy. Dave Canales, we saw what happened last year with Rachaad White. Dave Canales is a guy that likes to choose one running back, and he loves to commit to the run. So whenever Jonathan Brooks gets back, he's going to be the lead running back on a better than people think it's going to be Carolina Panthers offense. They're going to want to run the ball and establish it, pick your cliche. But so I would not want to go into the season with Jonathan Brooks as a starter. But if I got a couple of, if I had 2 strong running backs, even 3 strong running backs, love Jonathan Brooks as like sort of a grab and stash. But again, if I punted running back and I've got a bunch of wide receivers, I'm going with what's called a 0 RB build. If I've got a bunch of wide receivers, an elite tight end, a light quarterback, and now I'm trying to look for my second running back, and Jonathan Brooks is there, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pass because you don't want Jonathan Brooks as your number 2 running back this year. Because again, it might be 4 weeks before he's in, it might be 8 weeks before he's in. So again, I think it sort of depends, Ken, on how you're constructing your roster, who the specific player is, what your league's rules are, how big your bench is, do you have an IR spot, that kind of thing. So, but generally speaking, I I would grab them and stash them if there's somebody that I'm interested in, assuming the price is right. Does that make sense? It's kind of a hard question to answer in, because I think it's more of a case-by-case basis than a one, catch-all kind of idea.
No, I enjoy it. Thank you, everybody. The host of Fantasy Football Happy Hour. You can check him out on NBCSports.com, NBC, the NFL on NBC, and of course, Peacock. Matthew, always appreciate it. You have a great day.
Hey, Ken, thanks so much. Good luck to you this year.
Thank you.
Congrats, you finished the video. If you want to build on that success, download the NBC Sports Chicago app. It's got highlights, exclusive insights, and push alerts tailored to you. Everything you need to be a real Chicago sports fan. Download it now.